Hello, hello, hello. This is Andrei Malayev-Babel, the head of the Demidov Association, International Demidov Association, and this is our Instagram Live. And I am I'm about to invite in Andrei Viziorik, who is joining. So wish me luck with that. Andrei, are you almost here? I think Andrei is about to join. There you are.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I can
Yes.
certainly hear you. Perfect. Wonderful. Well, today is our long-awaited broadcast because we've been away for a while, very busy with acting certification program. We have actually two tracks of it. Uh, Obviously, there is the English-speaking track, and there is also the Russian-speaking track because the Moscow studio, Demidov Studio Moscow, is also being certified. There is the teacher certification program, which you are a part of course, not to mention the academic year at the FSU Oslo Conservatory, which is where we are training our MFA actors in the Demidov technique live. And that oasis is also very important, just as Demidov Studio London that you are heading, and Demidov Studio Athens that is headed by Vicky Georgiadou. And also Andrew Bosworth is heading the Chicago studio, Demidov Chicago studio, that is developing. And that is our world that we have time to mention. Of course, there is more to it. But shall we jump to our theme today? And maybe we can also connect what we are talking about with some of the training opportunities, simply because Demidov is purely practical. And yeah, it's based in skills, or as Demidov would put it, it's based in reflexes. And as you develop certain creative reflexes, they begin to apply to a lot of different other aspects of work, because in addition to training or work on self, there is also rehearsal work, there's also performance work, there is acting for the stage, there is acting for the camera, right? Commercial acting. I think we have some questions about that today. But, and Andrei, may I turn it over to you so we could begin our theme?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just great that we get an opportunity to speak about what I think is a very important topic. And one that is not really spoken about, I don't think, with any precision. There's a lot of lip service paid to freedom in acting, but I thought it might be a good idea just to talk about, well, actually, it links in with one of the questions we have.
Okay. And by the way, lovely people who have joined us, hello. We are very, very happy to see you. And Andrei, if I understand correctly, everyone is free to share their questions in the chat. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. If questions come up, feel free to ask them. We do have quite a lot of questions. I'm
Okay,
not quite
let's
sure
jump to it then. Let's jump to it.
to get to all of them, but we'll do our best.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, one of the questions is about the difference in the Demidov work when Demidov talks about freedom, um, as opposed to, well, let me read the question. How can an actor find freedom when working? No, many acting techniques talk about freedom. What is the difference between what Demidov says and, for example, the work of Meisner, Michael Chekhov, or other Stanislavski-based approaches? I thought it might be a good idea to speak a bit about, what we mean when we talk about freedom from a Demidov perspective. So maybe we could
Absolutely.
link that.
Yes,
Hmm.
my very short answer would be this. It is true, a lot of masters of theater pay lip service to freedom. They mention it. So they do what they do, and then they talk about freedom. And then again, they do what they do, and then they talk about freedom. Demidov's technique is the technique of freedom. The training, the school is based in the culture of freedom. And if we think of basic cultures, it is culture of passivity, which is, of course, connected with the culture of freedom. Culture of intuition, which, of course, has to be connected with the culture of freedom. Culture of calm, for example, which is what's allowing actors to have the guts to be free. In other words, when other acting systems, methods, or techniques, and Demidov doesn't have a system, Demidov doesn't have a method and doesn't have a technique, he has a school. And that school in Demidov's curriculum is a 4-year training, which, of course, you can also look at 4 stages of training, right? And that 4 years of training could be squeezed into 2-year certification program, as we are doing it, for example. At the FSU Asolo, I'm even managing to squeeze a lot of it into 1 year of training, right? Because of the structure of the program. But ultimately, it is a school. And everything that is a school is signaling to you that in order to master it, in order to make it your default, because your default is very important, it is going to take over when you're in front of the audience, your default. Not what you've been training for a while, right? But whatever has become your default through sustained training, right? And so Demidov is developing this culture of freedom in actors because from the very beginning, he's telling them, well, give yourself absolute freedom. Don't interfere. Let it do it. Allow yourself complete freedom of movements, thoughts, emotions, interactions. Nothing is blocked. Nothing is set. Nothing is predetermined. Nothing is preconceived. Right? And that is exactly the nature of a lot of questions that I anticipate without even hearing them. And that is, oh my God, if the culture of freedom is at the core, if actors are asked to be completely free in their training, what's going to happen when they meet the play? What's going to happen when they meet the director? Aren't they going to walk out to play Hamlet and play Othello instead? Right? It never happens, interestingly enough. Our actors are always playing the play that is written and always able to work with the director, even if that director is more prescriptive than it should be. But the culture of freedom is developed. You are actually taught to listen to your instincts, to get up when you feel like to get up, to move to the window when you feel like to move to the window, to become sad when sadness comes, to become joyful when joy comes, to shake your partner's hand if that's what you feel like doing. Nothing there is predetermined, preconceived. The actor is never told what to do. So what about discipline then, right? Well, there's a funny story that Demidov tells. He says, at the end of the day, when you fulfilled all of your director's prescriptions and you're about to open, your director is always going to come to you and say, listen, you're doing everything I'm telling you to do. You're doing it brilliantly. In fact, you're doing exactly what I've said. But now can you find freedom in it? And that actor is going to say, what? And the director is going to say, well, freedom in it. Could you do it like you feel like doing it in the moment rather than I told you to do it? Because that's how it looks on stage. Very often you see actors who are clearly doing what they've been told to do, and you can tell the difference. They're not getting up because they feel like it, right? They're not turning to the right because they feel like it. They're not saying it like that because they really feel like it. And then a cat walks onto the stage or a kid walks onto the stage and wipes these actors off the stage, off the screen, because they're doing what they feel like doing, right? And so when that actor is going to ask that director, how do I actually do that? How do I find freedom in this strictly prescribed environment? The director is going to say, that I have no idea. You have to do it. And this is the actual dialogue between Stanislavski and one of the great Moscow Art Theater actors, where at the end of a rehearsal period, Stanislavski asked for freedom, and neither of them knew how to get it. Stanislavski, though, speaks of freedom. And opponents of Demidov will say, well, Stanislavski speaks of freedom too, check mark. Does Stanislavski tell you how to get that freedom? Not at all. Does anybody else tell you how to get that freedom? Only Demidov trains you in the culture of freedom from the very beginning, because he says, if you wait until the end to find that freedom, it's too late. It is either a trained in, deeply trained in quality that will then apply to your work, no matter how prescribed some of these directions are going to be. Or it is going to be missing. That's why Demidov knows that if you don't train that actor in the culture of freedom and don't instigate that freedom, inspire that freedom, find very precise technique to facilitate that freedom, which is exactly what he does. If you don't do it as step one, at the end of training, it's going to be too late. It's going to be impossible to obtain it, because freedom has to be cultivated from day one. How it applies to strict disciplines, well, we'll talk about it certainly. So that would be my way of answering that question.
Yeah, it's interesting, and you know, I've had the comment not infrequently that there is this kind of suspicion of the idea of freedom, that it sort of equates with chaos. You know, that if I'm completely free, everything's going to be chaotic, and how can it possibly be structured and disciplined if I'm just giving in to everything that's come to me?
It's also a very good question. So let's look at where these actors are finding their discipline, their structure, right? In the Demidov universe of acting, which is completely different from all others, they find it in the given circumstances. They find it in the facts of the play. That's why they never walk out and play something chaotic. They always play the script. They also obviously spend a lot of work accumulating and facilitating characters. So then they walk onto the stage, it's that character at work. And you would agree, when the character is set, when the relationships between characters are set and cultivated and developed throughout the rehearsal and independent work, when the facts of the play, the given circumstances of the play are present and tangible, how could you possibly deviate from the play? It's impossible. In all other universes, you don't hold on to the facts because they don't exist. So the actors are basically learning facial expressions, intonations, they're learning movements, they're learning blockings, right? They're learning the dead form, the dead style, right? The dead outcome of something that is supposed to be alive, but because they're holding on to the external form, or they're holding on to the non-existing actions. For example, here I do this, there I do that. Be it a psychological verb, right? Be it a physical verb. In all of these cases, it is absolutely impossible to hold on to this, because that's not how human beings operate.
Right.
When we do act, right, and fulfill actions, we are not aware of it in everyday life at all. I had an esteemed colleague who was present with me during a panel at ERTAS, where we prepare candidates for their auditions for graduate school. And during that talk, he said, answering the question of what's most important, he said, the most important, you must always know what you are doing at any particular moment. At that moment, one of the organizers walked in with a dog. And that dog started running around and being friendly and jumping at people and just entertaining everyone. And then that teacher added, or rather, you should be just like that dog. To which I said, but that dog has no idea what it is doing now. He thought for a second and said, no, it doesn't. Right? Isn't it interesting? So when you hold on to actions, which is just a thought out device that Stanislavski came up with, not part of how we operate, right? When you hold on to manifestations of the ready life of the character, movements, blockings, facial expressions, right? Intonations, when you hold on to that, none of it is going to hold, because that's not how you're wired to operate. Why? Because when you enter the stage, or when the camera begins to roll, you don't stop being a human being. And as a human being, you're operated by the facts of your life. You're operated by the events of your life. They're the ones that you perceive, which is why Demidov's work is not based on action, it's based in perception. If you don't perceive, you're not going to act. Action then becomes a reaction. And so as these actors are trained from day one in the Demidov school to perceive facts, that includes facts that come from the partner, circumstances,
Right.
circumstances in the space, circumstances that happened before the play, circumstances that are happened right now as I'm interacting with someone. Then, of course, they naturally respond to these facts with action, but it's the facts that they're holding on to. So what's preventing them to venture into chaos and what's structuring that freedom is the facts of the play, which I dare say only exist in the Demidov universe. If you watch any other work, you will notice a very funny situation. Actors are saying the lines that contain a lot of facts, but they're only talking of these facts. None of these facts are actually taking place. Nobody is really in love with anyone. Nobody is really stealing from anyone. Nobody is really, they're just pretending some of it is happening. But mostly they're just, as Stanislavski would say, reporting to the audience what is going on instead of undergoing it, which is only possible if facts through the entire course of training for the actor, and they begin to pull the actor and push the actor, just like in life.
Right.
Where you are not the master of facts. The facts are the master of you. They manipulate you much more than you manipulate them, although you can try, but you still would be manipulating facts of your life by using other existing facts. You couldn't do anything else.
Very calculated, right? Everything.
Well, the acting then becomes calculated, but most importantly, just watch any show almost. Actors are just talking about what's happening while it's not really happening. In Demidov, they are operated by the facts of the play, by the events of the play, by the circumstances that are really happening, and out of these circumstances they speak. And that's a completely different situation because these circumstances are always present in the Demidov school. And we work with circumstances from day one. What happens is the play always starts where it's supposed to start and finishes where it's supposed to finish and takes the course that it is supposed to take. How does Demidov activate facts that the actors only understand intellectually? That's exactly it. Because in other schools, actors understand them intellectually, but they're not happening for them. He does it by actually allowing actors from the very first day to train in this technique, if you wish, in this school of the facts embodying in the space on their own and actors responding to them. These facts are even unknown in the beginning because they're only encoded in the text that is given to you. But because they're trained to embody characters and they're trained to be operated by facts from day one, it then, of course, applies to their work in rehearsal and in performance. That's another thing that very few people understand, that it is the daily scale work that Demidov invented. Daily scale work that used to exist only in music and in maybe in drawing, in painting, right, in visual arts, where they're sketching, they're doing their etudes, right, while musicians are playing their scales and etudes. Demidov developed for the first time in the acting science these scales that you can play every day, and they will actually activate the right default when you're walking onto the stage. That's an answer that is purely theoretical, but to truly figure out how Demidov does it from day one, well, you probably would be better off taking a foundational intensive. And by the way, there are 2 of them, and I have no idea if there are still spaces, but they don't report to me. But there are 2 foundational intensives that I will be teaching in May, right? And Andrei Biziorik also has some courses coming up. But ultimately, to experience the foundational scale-like work would immediately answer that question in terms of how does Demidov prepare you from day one for something that is unthinkable in most performances, being able to be operated by the facts of the play, transforming from the facts, which is what makes us who we are, the facts of our life, right?
Which is not understood necessarily intellectually.
Nope.
This is the point of that question.
None
right?
of it is understood intellectually.
It's something that very often the actors are perceiving these facts at an emotional level before they even understand what those facts
And
are.
the moment they begin to understand them intellectually, that actually kills the vibrations of these facts in the space, right?
Exactly.
These facts can actually manifest themselves in the space and begin to act on you. Now, you might say, but they're imaginary facts. How could they manifest in the space? Easily. Things imaginary are able to manifest as strongly as things that exist according to our kind of best knowledge, so to speak. When you are running somewhere because you are late, in fact, you are not late. You just miscalculated. Today is not Tuesday, today is Thursday, right? But you are running to a meeting that you think is happening today, and you are, you know, rushing and speeding and you're cursing and so on. The fact of the meeting, which is completely fictitious, is nevertheless driving you, right? So imaginary facts are as real as the real one, but there comes Demidov, who creates these genius exercises, etudes, or questions and answers that only his school has, that actually bring the actor in the right relationship with these energetic forces in the space, with these facts. Imaginary facts, oh yeah. And they're the ones that actually provide that structure and save us from chaos, as well as, of course, character facilitation and character accumulation techniques, and the whole Demidov school, all of the cultures.
Very good. That's great, Andrei. Maybe we'll just move on to another question to see if we can get in as many as possible while we're...
Please, absolutely.
Well, let's see. Maybe the next one to follow would be, how can an actor find freedom when working with directors who are very prescriptive in what they want, in ways that go against the actor's own intuition? It's an interesting question, actually.
Absolutely. Well, Demidov has this wonderful book, which is present in the collection that I published with my late colleague Margarita Laskina, who was Demidov's last assistant. The book came out from Routledge in 2016, and it is called Becoming an Actor Creator. It consists of it's a collection of 5 books, abridged, right? I'm working on actually releasing complete versions of these books. But at the moment, we still have a thick volume called Becoming an Actor Creator, where you want to go, because I advise you to not read anything else on Demidov, because people who write it do not know what they're writing, because they've never trained in this school, right? And the association, Demidov association that I had and Andrei is a part of, is based in the experience of working with the Demidov school practically at some of the top institutions in the world since 2008. Since 2008, right? So you can do your own math, right? And people who discovered this technique yesterday are perhaps trying to share their knowledge. Do not read them. Read Demidov. Read Becoming an Actor Creator. And if you want to train with specialists that are qualified, also go to the demidovassociation.org, right? And check out what's available. Obviously, the 2-year actor certification program is offered, you know, every 2 years. The teacher certification program is offered also every 2 years. But ultimately, it is a place where you also will find what the chapter organizations are doing. And the summer is the only time when I can do some summer courses, which is what I'm doing this summer. But ultimately, that's kind of the place. That's kind of the place to go. And when it comes to that second book in that collection, Becoming an Actor Creator, it is called Actor Types. Demidov talks about 4 actor types: intellectual, not an actor, ultimately; emotionally willful, the Stanislavskian type, right? Imitator, This is where most of the Stanislavskian actors end up anyway, right? Imitating. And of course, that's the Comédie Française school. That's the Juilliard school to a big degree, right? And of course, it is the affective actor, the tragic actor, the actor tragedian like Ira Aldridge, for example, like Eleonora Duse, right? Like all of these great tragic traveling stars that Demidov studied. So the imitator, right, is the one who doesn't know even what living on stage is. Emotionally willful is trying to live on stage, right? And intellectual couldn't begin to live on stage even if they wanted to, right? So just as there are 4 actor types, there are 4 director types. And if you are, right, a passionate, tragic type actor who is an affective actor, right? Affective actor, it speaks for itself. And you're working with an imitator director, good luck to you. And if you're an intellectual actor and working with an affective director, good luck to you, right? You'll never be operating out of the same universe, right? So Demidov, however, pays us some very important service. He begins to inspire affectivity even in the work of the emotionally willful, even in the work of the imitator. He actually creates certain devices and techniques that allow us to rise to the peak, to the top of the affective technique, because each and every one of us, no matter which type we predominantly belong to, has some sparks of affectivity that can be developed, right? And so while you will never be at home with a director that is not your creative type, and you know that very well from experience, you nevertheless can use certain devices from the Demidov school if you want to be a free actor, a co-creator, becoming an actor creator. Remember the title of the book. If you want to be that co-creator, then you, for example, go to the Demidov technique of assigning. And instead of learning these blockings so that they become muscle memory and you become an autopilot like mechanical actor, right? You assign these blockings. Stage directions, even line readings can all be turned into assigned stage directions, right? And because assigning has nothing to do with memorizing or learning, and it is allowing you to fulfill all of these set stage directions creatively, freely, even if that freedom is an inner freedom, it is absolutely enough. Even if outwardly you're doing it exactly as the master told you, so to speak, right? But inwardly you remain free with all of the nuances and subtleties of every performance being different every time, then you're living on stage, then you're creating, right? And that is what allows an actor in the Demidov school to work even with a director who is not of their type, with an imitator type director who wants everything fixed, right? Or mostly with emotionally willful directors, because most directors have been trained in the school of Stanislavski, or frankly, in the bastardized school of Stanislavski, because we cannot equate Stanislavski, no matter how wrong he was on certain accounts, we cannot equate that great artist with his followers who are incredibly dogmatic and narrow-minded, and simplified and oversimplified his teaching to the degree that it stopped being emotionally willful and became the art of an imitator ultimately.
Right. And of course, with those assigning of those details or those stage directions, and that was actually one of the other questions about finding freedom in detailed stage directions, it becomes part of what I feel like doing, not just because I was told to do it. Right? It becomes part of
that's the most important thing. It doesn't look like a blocking. It really looks like, and it is, interestingly enough, despite all the strict discipline, right? Despite all that, this actor gets up and moves to the window exactly when they're supposed to, out of that inner impulse, because they truly felt like doing it, right? How Demidov triggers it, that is the secret of the art of assigning, because we are talking about very important things that must be trained first, right?
Yes.
So how do you assign this rather than memorize this?
Right.
It's not muscle memory at work, which is how actors usually learn their blockings. It's a completely different structure where you're operating not out of, I've been told by the director to do this, but you're again operating out of certain external forces, facts, events, given circumstances, right? And therefore you're operating organically, and therefore you're operating the way that you're wired to operate in life. Stanislavski did not know how human beings operate. He wasn't a trained psychologist and psychiatrist like Demidov. But Demidov certainly knew it, which is why the greatest psychologists and psychiatrists like Ukhtomsky and Vygotsky, for example, were asking him to publish his books so that they could quote him because of how clearly he understood the nature of creativity and nature of the creative process, which is organic, right? You cannot stop being a human being when you walk onto that stage. You cannot suddenly become a marionette, a puppet, right? You will still be doing one thing, wanting to do another, and the audience will see both. And the audience will not find you credible, even if they give you a standing ovation at the end. They will walk out of it and they will feel that something was rotten, that they were duped, because they were duped. Because as you are elevated and lit on that stage, everybody sees that you want to do it differently, and you're making yourself doing it the way that you've been told to. And Demidov has the only way of merging both, where according to Demidov, improvisation remains, but it becomes inner improvisation. Inner improvisation. While outwardly you are doing seemingly everything that the director told you, every performance.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point about that connection between discipline and freedom. The fact that we in terms of assigning, right, that we are assigning something, we're assigning a certain, let's say, a discipline of stage directions, and yet there is an inner freedom, and yet I feel completely free within that environment.
However, let us also add that a Demidov actor could improvise everything as well. If they're working with a director who doesn't want to fixate things and trust the actor, and there are those. Some directors don't fixate it until almost the opening night. Some directors never fixate it, right? Demidov actor can improvise blockings, adjustments, intonations, given and certainly stage directions, right? Can really improvise the totality of the performance, inner and outer. They're absolutely trained to do that. That's what they're trained to do. Then they're also trained how to subject that freedom to a discipline, but not at the expense of freedom.
Yes. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, there's another question about, and this probably links to what we've just been saying, about how can the Demidov method, he or she calls it, be used in hyper-commercial environments where rehearsal time is limited to marking out the blocking, and other actors may be skeptical of exploring acting exercises.
Well, that is what it's actually made for.
Yeah.
Because with the Demidov school being in your bones, you don't need a lot of time to rehearse.
Right. Right.
And I've just seen an example of that. A wonderful first-year actor from the FSU Oslo Conservatory just stepped on a day notice or something like this into 12th night as Olivia and did a beautiful work without hardly any rehearsals. You know what put-in rehearsals are like, right? They're very schematic, they're very quick, right? And she is really blooming on that stage and doing beautiful things with a book in her hand, right? So that's a very good example. Had she rehearsed Olivia? No. Had she rehearsed that play? No. But remember that Demidov doesn't teach you how to play a particular role or how to play a particular play like Stanislavski. Demidov teaches you to play anything. Demidov teaches transformability. He teaches you how to transform into any character rather than teaching you how to transform into that character. He teaches you how to freely live on stage in any circumstances of any play, rather than how to live on stage in those circumstances. Right? In Stanislavski, you train into you, right, the through line of a particular play. You train into you a character. You train into you, right, given circumstances of a particular play. Not in Demidov. In Demidov, you are existing freely in any character with any given circumstances. And every etude, and how many hundreds of thousands of etudes would you be playing if you are to go through the Demidov training? In every etude, you're a new character. In every etude, you're in a new circumstances, right? So you are basically taught how to live on stage in any character and in any circumstances, which means in any play. So when you are given a play and given a role, all you have to do is to learn the lines. And Demidov gives you this very specific ways of learning these lines that cause the circumstances to materialize and that evoke the character. And then you can walk onto the stage. Or you don't have to learn your lines. You can do it on book. You can do it with a little bug in your ear, with a prompter. It will happen. You will be that character as you hit the floorboards, even if you didn't have a lot of time to accumulate that character.
And also to work with actors who aren't trained in the Demidov way, right? Demidov school.
Absolutely.
To whatever is there.
Because when you are free, you can actually corrupt the whole ensemble into freedom. And we've seen so many examples how actors who were free because they were trained in Demidov walked onto that stage and were met with a blind eye of the partner. You know, actors usually don't see anything. That's their eyes on stage. They're blind.
Yeah.
They don't see the partner. And that live actor looks into their eyes and keeps looking into their eyes until that blind eye suddenly wakes up.
Yeah.
And before you know it, there is another human being on stage, and now there are two human beings on stage. And then that free actor acts against the third partner, right? And that third partner is also staring at them and just delivering their lines, right? Not even to them, probably to the audience. But then that free Demidov actor takes that actor by the hand suddenly, and that touch wakes up the actor. And the actor begins to truly see and truly hear. And the next line that comes out of their mouth is a line of a human being. The words of the human being that come from the soul and not from that mechanical center that most actors are spitting their lines out of.
Well, that makes sense. And I think it's funny that a lot of questions, there's a similar answer to a lot of the questions that we get, in that training in this way, training in school, answers actually a lot of these questions.
Yes.
Certainly questions about freedom, certainly questions about the relationship.
We are talking theoretically. Thank you, Andrei, for saying that. We are talking theoretically. It is not making a lot of sense what we are saying until you experience it practically. In Demidov, theory doesn't come ahead of practice. So we are doing now what is part of our mission, part of the association's mission, and that is to spread that gospel, so to speak, right? But we are fully aware of the fact that only once you've been in a Demidov etude facilitated by an expert, which is what Demidov insists on, only expert can facilitate it. And expert is someone who worked with this technique for a very long time, right? At the moment, I'm the one who has done it the longest on planet Earth. I don't know what's happening on other planets, right? But, and I ultimately introduced the West to this technique, and I certainly reintroduced Russia to this technique where it was forbidden. After Demidov died, it was persecuted for many, many years because he contradicted Stanislavski's dogmas. And certainly until you've been inside a Demidov etude, guided by an expert, you don't really know what it is that we are talking about. not through a
Yeah.
fault of your own, but because you are hearing these words that we are saying, relating them to your former practice. And that's the only
Yeah.
thing that we can relate things to. We can only
Yeah.
relate things to our practice. And because in your former practice, somebody also did some lip service to freedom, to involuntarity, to improvisation, right? You're saying, oh yeah, it's Michael Chekhov. Oh yeah, it's Meisner, right? No, it's
Hmm.
not. It's a
Hmm.
completely different way of operating, but you have to be inside a Demidov etude before you begin to sense that Demidov awakens you in a completely different way than you've ever experienced before.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting thing because people hear it through their own filter and it's natural, they hear it through the filter of their own experience. But it's kind of like trying to explain, color to somebody who's never seen color.
Exactly, or try to explain how orange tastes to someone who never tasted an orange.
Right.
Good luck to you, right? They'll get an idea, right? But
Hmm.
it's not going to be the taste of orange. It's going to be an idea of the taste of orange.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, what we're hoping is that more people will want to have a taste of that orange because we feel it's important and
Yes, and
necessary.
yeah, that's why we created the Demidov Association, right? So
Hmm.
again, if you want to experience it not through our beautiful words, but in reality, go to demidovassociation.org, right?
Hmm.
Is that, in your experience, a state of acting regarding the text, or is it related to the imagination released? Both. Because the text has encoded in it all of the circumstances, the character, the relationship, right? And then the individuality of the actor with its imagination begins to interact with the text because the text is submerged into the actor's subconscious. Only Demidov knows how to do it, right? Because you don't memorize the text like in other schools. And
Yeah.
that releases actors' individuality, which is first and foremost their imagination. And yes, to the previous question, we have a lot of experience of working with Demidov in other languages, right? And language and
Mhm.
Demidov is a very interesting issue. And
Yeah,
perhaps
absolutely.
language and Demidov should become our topic of one of our
Could be the next one.
yeah, one of our classes, because when you're working in a foreign language, there's a huge advantage to train that way because you overcome certain stereotypical patterns, certain cliches, right, that you inherited from the way that you speak, and suddenly you speak differently, and suddenly you find spontaneity and life in it, right? The attention that is spent on watching what you are doing, right, too much, and bossing yourself around too much, right? It goes on to pronunciation of the foreign word, right? And you don't have time to watch yourself as much, you become freer. And there are many other interesting things. Different languages evoke different parts of your soul, right? Because they connect you better with the parts of your soul. And yes, I also have obviously experience of working in Brazil and in China, for example, where I was working with actors who were working in their original language.
Hmm.
But again, it's a large theme. Andre, I'm turning it back to you because I'm sure there are other questions.
Yeah, there's an interesting one actually about verse speaking. And I'd be interested to hear what you have to say about freedom within the discipline of verse and how one should assign its structure. Is it difficult to avoid intellectual interference?
Intellectual interference is always difficult to avoid if you have this overactive brain that is trying to explain something and figure everything out, therefore shutting down the work of the intuition or imagination or subconscious, right? Because
Hmm.
when the intellect is at work, subconscious is helpless. When you
Yeah.
turn off your head, which is part of the Demidov training, how to toss your head out the window, how to turn off your head, right? Then your subconscious, your mighty subconscious, the true creator in you, becomes very active and jumps out and begins to do miraculous things for you, right? But you have to turn
Hmm.
off the head. When you hear the text, if you stop hearing it as, ooh, this is what it must mean, and begin
Yeah.
to hear it as sounds, almost as music, and assign it like that, right? Which is what we
Right.
teach how to do that, right? Then,
Yeah.
of course, the text and the given circumstances are going to be submerged into the depth of your depth, out of which they will bear beautiful fruit, character, circumstances, relationships, right? Life on stage, all will come out of a much deeper place in you rather than your narrow intellectual mind, rather than your cerebral peripheral self, right? So that is something that we certainly teach. That's a part of the work. I don't think that verse is going to make it more difficult, because verse is filled with alliteration. Alliteration is the music of the sounds. So verse is going to inspire even more beautiful things in you if you approach it as music, right, rather than trying to dissect what it means. The discipline of verse, which is very often dropped, right? We see Shakespeare, we see Moliere, where, yeah, they're speaking in verse, but there is no breath at the end of the line, right?
Right. Yeah.
There is not even a catch breath, right? So the rhyming is not followed, right? The rhythm is not followed. They're just turning it into prose, right? And Moliere has this very wonderful play, right? The Would-Be Gentleman, where the main character lives to 50 years or something, then hires a tutor, and tutor explains to him that apparently for his entire life he has been speaking in prose. And this guy says, oh my God, apparently I speak in prose, right? Well, you can't speak in prose when it's poetry, because the author did not intend it so, because if he intended it so, he would have written it in prose. And Shakespeare, of course, switches from prose to poetry within the same character, within the same play, telling you which register to play this particular moment in, right? The bass and rough or the elevated. So all of it is hugely important, but it will guide you, it will feed you on the level of the poetry of sounds, right? It should not put you in your head if you are approaching it based on the Demidov school.
Yeah, great. And I mean, the last question we had really was to do with, I think we've actually covered this a little bit in each of the answers. It's something that I certainly get asked a bit about by actors. And the question is, I find myself often stuck in my head when acting, worried about having to get right everything I need to do. How is it possible to get out of your head and still maintain the discipline required by the script and the role? I mean, we've probably spoken about this already.
We spoke about the discipline required by the script, and the role is encoded in three things that are missing from contemporary theater: character, events or given circumstances, and relationship. Why does character not show up? Why is character missing? Because everybody plays a version of themselves. Everybody plays their habitual mask in every role. They don't know how to create that character for the most part, because they don't know how to yield themselves to someone who is not themselves, or not their everyday self, rather. Right? Facts are missing because, as one of participants of today's meeting said, they're understood intellectually, but they don't become the real facts of my life. As character or as a human being, as an actor, right? Or relationships. What was the last time you've seen two leads who were truly in love with each other? Have you ever believed that these two individuals actually love each other? No, you've never believed that. You know, for as long as you've seen theater, right, you probably encountered something like this, very rarely, if at all. So once character, facts of the play or given circumstances, and relationships really materialize in the space, once they're evoked, everything will take care of itself, and everything will have the structure and the discipline of the play, and the playwright will thank you. The playwright will say, oh my God, this is what I, Anton Chekhov, wanted, right? Rather than this is what the director, who usually is not nearly as significant as Anton Chekhov, wanted. Because directors, of course, diminish the content of the play based on their own content, and their own content is never going to be as spacious as Chekhov's. But in order to actually play Chekhov, you first have to read the play. And if you start reading it intellectually, you will begin to invent things based on who you are, and not based on who Chekhov was or who his characters were. Only if you submerge the play into the depth of your depth, then your artist and not your everyday egotistical self will give birth to an actor who is congenial to Chekhov. And then you will see a completely different play, but you will not be able to understand it by reading it or dissecting it or analyzing it the way that it's taught in our analytical techniques, including Stanislavski's.
Which is a huge problem. Still, even today. And there is one more question here about the relationship between Demidov and Stanislavski, and this person obviously has read something, because they're saying that why did Stanislavski not take more from Demidov in terms of his discoveries about freedom?
He couldn't. He couldn't. Stanislavski was, as all of us, right, only able to comprehend what he was able to comprehend. He also was a celebrity of international scale. He had his reputation to think of, right, and to maintain. He was operating in the Soviet Union at the time when Soviet Union was a prison. Well, Soviet Union has always been a prison, right? And in order to be able to communicate with his family abroad and support them abroad, he had to, unfortunately, do things that were not driven by artistic reasons, but by commercial reasons. And that goes for an actor prepares, or an actor's work in its original rendition, right? So there are reasons and reasons and reasons why Stanislavski worked with Demidov for longer than he's worked with anyone else. For 30-something years they were together, right? Why he listened to Demidov, why he did a lot of things trying to meet Demidov halfway. Method of physical actions is one way to try to correct things that Demidov actually indicated were wrong in the Stanislavski system, right? But he couldn't fully let go of actions. He could not fully let go. If he lived another 5 years, 10 years, yes, he would. Because Demidov would have finished him off ultimately and would have convinced him. And of course, Stanislavski, as a great artist, would always be convinced when he understood that the truth is there. He saw the fruit of Demidov's work, he admired it, but he thought, surely this is coming from my system, and surely I can achieve something like this by tweaking my system. And it wasn't true, because it wasn't coming from his system. It was coming from a completely different system of the universe, from a different view of the universe, and ultimately from a different universe where sun did not revolve around the earth. Right? So that's why. That's why. Is it there was a question on assigning, if I understand correctly, right? Very briefly, there's a way to assign one's lines without a partner. Yes, there is a way, but again, practically, we would have to work with this. What is your opinion on method acting? Method acting is a bastardized version of Stanislavski, right? And as every bastardized version of Stanislavski, it's an animal of its own. There are some great teachers in it. They're dead, right? Some of these teachers were genius teachers because they knew how to choose star pupils, right? And the more star pupils you have, the more famous you are as a teacher. Some of it and most of it became purely commercial nowadays and probably doesn't have the original spirit, just as the original spirit of the Stanislavski system is missing from almost everyone's work who swears by the word of Stanislavski, right? Wasn't Stanislavski working in the same direction of being present with the other actor, not thinking of his system? Yes, absolutely. When actors became inspired, right, he said, now forget the system, now just basically be. Yes, but he also had completely wrong approach towards inspiration, towards what makes an actor inspired, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a reference to Demidov's technique of psychological breathing or psychic breathing, inspiration, right? So no, Stanislavski said a lot of things that will strike you as coming from Demidov's mouth, so to speak, but what he did, right? We always have
Yeah.
to look at what people do, right? When they put their actors on stage, what is going on that stage?
Mm-hmm.
Is it genuine life or imitation of it? Right? Is
Mm-hmm.
it actually being driven by the facts and truly transforming from the essence of it? Or is it playing character, playing facts, conveying them to the partner or mostly to the audience? We have to look at that theater that is going on as a result of this teacher's work or this director's work, not at what they're saying.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of what we're trying to work towards, right? As part of the mission here is to work towards
Which
having
is
enough.
something that will
Right.
come very, very quickly, and it will have to happen soon because obviously there's a huge experience since 2008. There are experiences of a lot of productions, right? But there is no Demidov theater as of yet, right? And if someone calls their theater Demidov theater, well, then that is a death sentence to them, because of course you cannot create a Demidov theater without very thorough research, and most importantly without actors who have been trained in the complete Demidov curriculum, which
Exactly.
at the moment
Yeah.
is not being taught anywhere
Yeah.
except at the association, because nobody except the association has access to Demidov's archives, right, and could recreate the sequence of training, which in Demidov's plan takes 4 years, right? But at least it takes 4 stages. There are certain things that you have to know in order to train someone in the Demidov approach. And most of it is what to do with the foundation and how to sustain that foundation throughout other periods of training. In other techniques, foundation goes away before you know it, and that includes Stanislavski. So how to sustain the art of truly seeing and truly hearing on stage and reacting to what's going on rather than to some preconceived something, right, is only Demidov's scales can teach you how to do. But because they are reflex-based scales, as soon as you stop doing them, before you know it, you're reverting to what you used to do before, and you still think that you are living on stage, but you're no longer living on stage, because the inner gauge that tells you when you are living and when you are faking, when you are living freely or when you are just tensing up and squeezing out with gusto, right? This inner gauge is missing in a lot of actors because it takes years to actually figure it out. The inner gauge that reacts to every slight deviation from truth that you're about to make right before it happens and corrects it why before it happens. That inner gauge is unique to the Demidov school.
And that takes time. That takes time.
It sure does. It sure does. Which is why I'm warning you against Demidov classes or Demidov theater, right? Just look at the pedigree. Find out how long these actors trained. Find out who they trained with. And you will know that this is not Demidov. It is something else. I'm not saying that we've mastered everything. I'm not saying that we've done everything, but we've done enough to be able to come very close to the creation of the Demidov theater, which, of course, you're absolutely right, Andrei, is our next step.
And I'm just aware of time, Andrei, and we want to keep this under an hour, but
we sure do.
Maybe just a final word on the speaking of foundation, right? On the foundational intensity.
The problem with all of the transition to scene study rehearsal work is that they let go of the foundational exercises. Foundational exercises are the ones that allow you, if you keep playing them, walk onto the stage and play any character, right, and be in any play. And there are 2 foundational intensives that are offering in May. Again, check at demidovassociation.org, right? I don't know there's still spaces, but I would be happy to see you there. So we have to say goodbye to keep it under an hour. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Andrei. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.
You too. Thanks so much.